Hey everyone, and welcome back to Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite. I am your host, Jim Chapman, and we are back with this 16th installment in our Murdaugh series. And it's been a little while, a couple of volumes of the Murdaugh jailhouse phone calls have been headed your way the past couple of weeks. Everybody's enjoyed that, but we are back into the trial. And this is the 6th day of that trial. And we're going to pick up with that day. And I'll kind of just summarize the testimony that is not critical. All of it's critical to the case, but some of it a lot more dramatic than others. So I'll summarize some of the people from that day. A representative from Snapchat by the name of Heidi Galore. She is the law enforcement operations lead for Snapchat, and she was able to get into the account of Paul Murdaugh and find a Snapchat video that he had posted. Now, that video was posted at 7:36 p.m. on the night that Paul and Maggie were murdered. If you'll remember, police theorized they were murdered between 8:45 and 9:03, I think is what they came up with. And the issue with that time and the fact that Alex Murdaugh was actually in that video pulling on a tree by the kennels. He was clearing some shrubs or something, and Paul was laughing in the background. That's a big problem because Alex said he wasn't there at that time. Timing is important in this case. Obviously, that's just like an hour and a half before they were killed. So the prosecution, in an effort to form a timeline that would make it kind of hard for Alex Murdaugh to have not committed the crime, they stressed the importance of this Snapchat video. Next up was an investigator from the solicitor's office, and his name was Dylan Hightower, and he was the one who actually discovered Maggie's phone by the roadside at Moselle. He just kind of testified as to how he found the phone, etc. It wasn't anything very dramatic. Then Jeannie Secklinger, who is the CFO of the law firm that Alex was a partner in, she testified about finding a ton of thefts that Alex committed during his time at the law firm after a forensic audit was performed. That was performed by an outside company after all of this came out with Alex Murdaugh. And of course, the reason this was allowed in the trial is the financial crimes are important because that would prove a motive as to why Alex lost his fucking mind. If he's having to steal millions and millions of dollars, and he's in all this financial trouble, what does that do? It makes you very desperate. So staying on that topic, and who you are going to hear from today is the testimony of Chris Wilson of the Wilson Law Group. Now, in addition to being a fellow attorney, Chris was also one of Alex's best friends. They have known each other since high school, and they went to law school together. They even were roommates during law school. So I'm going to set this up, and then I'm going to play the clip. But essentially what you're going to hear is Chris Wilson discuss a little about how him and Alex came to know each other, and then he's going to talk about a specific case that they worked on together where they sued the Mack truck company. It's insane. And this is really a good look at the emotional toll that this took on Alex's friends, people that trusted him, his best friend in this case. So here's that clip, Chris Wilson's testimony.
Raise your right hand, left hand on the Bible. Do you affirm your testimony about to get the court in this trial shall be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I'm going to see one of the stand. State your name again for the record. Spell your last name, please.
My name is James Christopher Wilson, Wilson. I go by Chris.
Mr. Wilson, you understand that we're here for an in-camera hearing to determine the admissibility of your testimony.
I do.
All right, and you're a lawyer, so you get that.
Yes, sir.
So I'm not going to go into everything that I might cover with you in a trial, but I do want to focus on particularly the Ferris case. You know which one I'm referring to?
Sure.
First of all, though, just very quickly, you're a lawyer, is that correct?
I am, since 1998.
1998. And describe very quickly your practice for the record.
Actually, since 1995. I've had my own practice since 1998. In the last 15 years, I've done primarily personal injury work, automobile accidents, people that are injured at work, malpractice type cases, those things.
And where do you normally practice? Where's your home base?
My only office is in Bamberg.
You do a lot of plaintiff's work?
That's all I do anymore. For the last 15 years, that's really all I do.
And do you know the defendant?
I do.
And when did you get to know the defendant?
I've known Alex since we were in high school. Bamberg and Hampton. I grew up in Bamberg, and they're only about 30 miles apart. And so I knew of Alec and had been around him some growing up. We had some mutual friends. I was a lot closer to some other guys in Hampton that I grew up playing golf and things like that with, but I would cross paths with Alec. Played on the same baseball team one summer, I think like our senior years in high school or somewhere around high school age. Didn't really keep in touch with him or cross paths with him until we ended up going to law school, and we started law school together at Carolina. 3 years there together at law school and lived together part of the time.
Did y'all become friends?
We did.
Become close friends?
Very close.
Best friends?
He was one of my best friends, yes. And I thought, he was, and I thought he felt the same way about me.
You feel that way now?
I don't know how I feel now, Mr. Waters.
Fair enough. Over the years, as you developed that close friendship with Alec, did y'all also have a professional relationship as well?
We did. When I finished law school, I went to work in Greenville for a judge for a year. Alec went to Beaufort to work with a law firm there. So we'd see each other, but it was more socially then. When I moved back to Bamberg to start practicing where I'd grown up, and he moved back to Hampton a couple years later, we started doing a little bit more work together, and we've done cases together really since 1998. I opened up my own firm in 98. I think that's about the same time he had moved back to his firm. And it was a bigger firm with resources that I didn't have starting out on my own, and so we started working cases together and worked a lot together.
Tell me, for the record, how that works when you're in a different firm than the firm he was in, correct?
Yes.
And so when two lawyers from different firms, or three, however many it is, share a case, how do you handle the payment of the fees if there's a successful recovery?
Well, it really all depends on the agreement that's reached up front between the lawyers and with the client's consent. But generally, all the cases that I work with his firm and with most firms I do business with, it's a 50-50 split on the fee recovery, or at least an equal split. Maybe if there are more than two lawyers, it'll be an equal split across the board. But generally, it was just my firm and his firm with a 50-50 split on attorney's fees recovered, and each firm recovers whatever costs they've advanced in the case. And sometimes his firm would advance more of the cost because they had a larger number of lawyers bringing in more money than I was and could afford to handle some of the bigger costs. But it's kind of whoever got the bill paid the bill, and then we reimbursed at the end whoever had advanced the cost.
Okay.
The client signs off on all of that.
Who ultimately, in those situations where is splitting a fee, is that a good way to call it?
Yes, sir.
Who handles the ultimate disbursement? How does that work?
Whichever lawyer receives the settlement checks or the checks to pay whatever verdict or judgment that was received. I can't say in every single case with Alec's firm, but in having gone back through my files and audited my paperwork, it looks like in almost every single case that we worked together, the disbursement, the money would come through to me and I would handle the disbursement. They were generally clients where I would associate his firm. They were my clients. They were people that had come to me and I wanted them to, frankly, know that I was the person that took care of them, and if they needed anything, they could come back. And so I wanted to be the person handling that part of it also.
All right. So if the money comes through you, then just mechanically, how do you go about paying Alec in a case where y'all are splitting a fee, or paying the firm?
Money comes in. Client has to come sign the check or whatever it is, along with my firm if it's made payable. It's generally made payable to Wilson Law Group or Wilson Law Firm and the client. Client comes in and signs the check. I endorse the check. We deposit that into my trust account. If it has to sit under Supreme Court rules, sometimes it has to sit for 10 days or more. Some smaller checks don't. Once it's been in the account long enough to be able to be dispersed pursuant to our rules, then my bookkeeper does the checks that I instruct her to do, and I sign the checks to make disbursements. If they're checks to another law firm, then the money is dispersed to that firm.
All right. In the course of litigation, are there typically costs and expenses that accrue during the course of that litigation?
Almost always.
And do those typically get paid out of whatever settlement is reaching, assuming a successful result?
They do. All of my fee agreements and every lawyer I've ever worked with have a provision in there that the client understands that the fees are advanced by the lawyer, but upon recovery, they're reimbursed or recovered by the lawyer.
In a particular case where you're splitting a fee and there were, in fact, fees and costs associated with a successful recovery, costs and expenses associated with a successful recovery, are those issued in a separate check typically, or a check together?
When I first started, I think my firm was doing cost and fees, not just for other firms, but cost and fees that were payable to my firm in the same check. But 10 plus years ago, if not longer, we started doing separate checks just to make the accounting and keeping up with it easier. So generally it's a fee check and a separate cost check.
And in 2020 and 2021, were you issuing those separate checks?
Yes.
Very quickly, without getting into the details, did you have a case in Allendale where you split it with Alec in the early part of 2021?
Yes, sir.
All right. And ultimately, was there a recovery in that case?
There was.
And
it was actually 3 cases, but they were similar factually, and so we treated them as one case, but it was three separate plaintiffs, 3 separate cases.
And ultimately, did your office disperse the fees and the expense check to PMPED?
On all 3 cases, yes, sir.
And those checks were made out to what when you dispersed those?
All 3 of the fee checks were made payable to, I don't know if we used the acronym PMPED or if we actually spelled out Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Dietrich, and Ellsworth, but PMPED.
And generally, except for the Ferris case, which we'll talk about in a minute,
Sure.
When you had those fee splits with Alec, were the checks made out to PMPED?
Yes,
They were
sir.
signed by you?
Yes, sir. And I'm the only person who can sign checks in my office. So, well, and now I had a partner at one time, but now I'm the only person that can sign checks.
Did you have a case involving Mack trucks that involved Alec?
Yes, sir.
And can you describe to the court how you ended up getting that case and how you ultimately associated Alec in that case? Please?
Sure. And I've heard it referred to as the Ferris case, so Mack Trucks and Ferris. I'd rather refer to it as the Mack Trucks case. Another lawyer had contacted me about a case that he was working on. Felt like he had a wreck involving a tractor trailer and an automobile in which a gentleman was injured. I believe he had already filed suit against the tractor trailer company and its driver and maybe another party. Started looking at the case for and with him. It involved a drive shaft that had fallen out of a Mack truck into the interstate, and this gentleman and a number of other cars had hit that drive shaft. And in looking at it and doing a little bit of research, I and he together realized that there very likely could be a products liability case involving a defect with the drive shaft of the truck or something like that. So I reached out to Alec and asked him if he could get involved in the case or would get involved in the case. And that's what his firm specialized in a lot, was products liability cases. And we were pushing some deadlines to bring in all the parties that we needed to, and so I reached out pretty quickly because I knew we needed some help.
And did he agree to be part of that case?
He did.
As that litigation proceeded, did y'all have, as is typical, some discovery hearings, discovery motions, and that sort of thing?
Well, we had a number of them. I don't remember how many, but we had a number of different motions and discovery that went back and forth, documents being exchanged, things like that.
All right. And did that ultimately set up the prospect of a trial in that case?
It did, but it was unusual. It wasn't a jury trial like is normally done in personal injury cases. It was a non-jury trial tried before a circuit court judge with an admission of liability. We waived punitive damages, and there was an agreement between the parties that neither party would appeal the result.
And in a case, plaintiff's case, civil plaintiff's case like this, if there's a large recovery, let's say for the plaintiff, and the defendant decides to appeal, does that typically delay payment of the recovery until that appeal is heard and resolved?
I mean, it can. Appeals, you never know how long an appeal is going to take. And so if the losing party, the defendant, the company that you're suing, whoever it might be, decides to appeal, they can tie the verdict up for a while. If you win the appeal, you're going to recover cost and interest. So, that's the remedy. But it can tie up money for people that are injured that need that money.
Did y'all ultimately try that case in a bench trial?
We did.
What county was it?
Excuse me?
What county?
It was in Richland County, Columbia.
And when did y'all try that case?
The first part of January of 2021.
And who did the closing argument in that case?
Alec.
Alec did. Did y'all ultimately? There had been a concession of liability, so the amount was really what was in question. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And how many plaintiffs did you have?
There were actually two cases, when we call it Ferris or the Mack Trucks case throughout all of this, but there were actually two cases. The gentleman that was injured and then his wife, we brought a loss of consortium claim for her for the loss of companion services that she had lost from him. And just not to get too detailed, Mr. Ward, that her case had gone into default. In other words, Mack Trucks hadn't answered the papers like they should have. And so they were in a really bad position on that case. And in the gentleman's case, they had answered, but we were discovering some things. When we were doing some discovery, it was clear they didn't want us looking much, much further. And so that's why this deal, everybody agreed to a non-jury trial without appeal with a waiver of punitive damages and an admission of liability was done. And we were in COVID, and it was going to take us a while to get the trial. So it worked out well for both parties, and the result worked out well for us.
And that's often how it goes in litigation. Both sides kind of decide what's best, and sometimes they can have a meeting of the minds.
Yes, sir.
All right. Was there ultimately a verdict by the judge in that case?
Well, two verdicts since two cases, yes, sir.
And what were those amounts?
I believe it was $4 million for the injured man and 1.5 for the wife. I remember it was 5.5 combined, but I think it was 4 and 1.5.
Right. And so how did the fees break down to the best of your recollection that were going to be split among the three lawyers involved?
There were
let me ask you this. Do you remember how much Alex's share of the fee was?
$792,000.
Okay. And yours?
There was a larger split to the attorney that initiated the case, but I believe Alec was $792. The math didn't work out perfectly. I was $791, and the other attorney was higher than that, but I don't remember the exact numbers.
In recognition of his origination?
Yes, sir.
In March of 2021, did you ultimately receive the monies and prepare for disbursement?
Yes, sir. I believe they came in late February because we dispersed in March, and I had to wait at least 10 days. Part of the money came by wire, which would have been kind of immediately available and accessible, but it was a smaller portion of the money. The larger portion came in a check, and because it was such a sizable amount, I waited maybe 12 or 15 days or so. I didn't disperse on the 10th day.
And did you have a conversation with the defendant about dispersing those fees?
I had a conversation with Alec and with the other attorney I worked on the case with when the fees were ready to be dispersed.
What about your specific conversation with Alec? Did he make any requests of you or have any discussion with you about how to handle his $792,000 share of the fee?
He did.
And tell me about that conversation, please.
When I contacted him and told him we were getting ready to disperse and we would have checks ready, he indicated to me that he was looking to place his fees in an annuity. He called it like a structure. I've never done one of those before, so I didn't really know how it worked. I've never done structure for my fees myself. I've structured client money, but not my fees. He indicated he was looking to do a structure by putting the monies into annuities and that the checks needed to be made payable directly to him, that he had already cleared it with his firm, that the monies were going to be put on the books and accounted for, and he would be credited as having received those monies.
Based on his representations to you that he had cleared it with his firm, did you agree to do something different and make the checks directly out to him?
I did.
I'll show you very quickly what's been marked as Exhibit 345, states 345 for purposes of this in-camera hearing, and see if you recognize that particular document.
I do.
All right, and what is that?
So this is the initial check that was written per Alec's instructions directly to him on the gentleman's case for fees made payable to Richard Alexander Murdaugh, Esquire, for $600,000. It's voided.
And why was it voided?
Because he instructed me afterwards, and I don't remember if it was in the same conversation or shortly thereafter. It must have been shortly thereafter, that the checks on that case needed to be made in two separate check payments. He was doing two separate annuities.
I'll show you what's been marked as 346 for purposes of this in-camera hearing, and see if you recognize these documents.
Yes, sir. The first page is the check payable directly to Richard Alexander Murdaugh, Esquire, for $192,000, and that is on the loss of consortium case for the wife. And on the bottom, just like that $600,000 check that was voided, it indicates it was for fees. I guess the other writing on here is maybe from
I'm just
the
focused
checks.
on the checks.
It's something to do with the way we recovered the checks.
All right.
The back page looks like an endorsement. Pay Bank of America deposit only. Looks like a signature, Bank of America.
Okay. And again, I'm just asking you to identify, see if you recognize those checks.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I recognize them.
All right. Tell me the second check, just
So-
the amount and what that's for.
The second check is for $225,000 payable directly to Richard Alexander Murdaugh, Esquire. It indicates on the bottom that it's for fees. This would be part of the rewrite of that $600,000 check that had been voided.
All right.
And then the third check is $375,000 check payable directly to Richard Alexander Murdaugh, Esquire, and it indicates fees, and that would be the remainder of the rewrite of that $600,000 check initially written that was voided.
And those second two were rewritten. Why?
At Alec's request, he had indicated that he was putting the money into two different vehicles or annuities, and needed the checks written that way.
What did you do with those checks after you, the three checks after you had finally cut them?
Obviously, I signed them, and at some point in time, I think Alex sent somebody up to my office to pick them up. I don't think I delivered them. Oftentimes, I put checks in the mail. Sometimes when they're larger, I either offer to have them picked up or delivered, and I think he had somebody come pick those up from my office.
Like a law firm runner or somebody like that?
Something like that, yes, sir. I don't even think I was in the office when they picked it up.
You've known Alec for a long time, right?
Since they're since the mid-'80s, mid-'80s, yes, sir.
Worked with him for a long time?
Many times.
Did his explanation to you about what he was going to do, did that raise any suspicions with you, to your friend that you've known for such a long time?
No, sir. It was different, but it didn't raise any red flags or suspicions to me that anything wrong was going on.
Because you trusted your friend, right?
Very much.
What was your perception of Alec's general wealth and success?
Thought he made a lot more money than I did. Always seemed to do well in his practice. All I ever heard is that he was one of the biggest producers in the firm. It's his family's name on the firm, but they acted like it was his name on the firm too. He and I handled big cases together. When I talked to the partners and other members of that firm, they were talking about big cases that they were handling with him. Felt like he did really well. And We never got into direct discussions about the amount of money he made or the amount of money I made. We talked about, sometimes business and sometimes money and sometimes things, but I always thought he made a lot of money.
Is that part of the reason why your suspicions didn't arise when you were asked to do this request by Alec?
I guess so. Not so much as just I'd never had any dealings with him that I had any reason to distrust what he was telling me. I mean, he was a partner in that firm. He had the authority, as far as I knew, to make decisions. I mean, if he'd have wanted to reduce the fee and take less, and it was payable to the firm, I wouldn't have questioned that. I didn't feel like he had to have his authority, his partner's approvals to make those type decisions.
All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as 347 and see if you recognize that document.
Yes, sir. The first check is a check that was made in May of 2021, May 13th, to Peters, Parker, Murdaugh, Ellsroth, and Dietrich for $14,619.13. I don't think on the bottom it says anything, but this was a cost reimbursement check on one of those two cases. And then the second check is a check made payable on the same day, May 13th, for the same amount of money plus 1 cent, so for 14 cents. And it was a cost reimbursement in the other case.
All right.
And that's made payable to the law firm also.
Who was your assistant or paralegal at this point in time?
Vicky. I mean, she's one of several, but Vicky is my primary paralegal.
At some point in May of 2021, did Vicky advise you of any inquiry coming from PMPED about where these fees were?
No, she didn't advise me in May about any inquiry about where the fees were. She had received an email in May from Alex paralegal, Annette, that said, hey, we got the cost check, but we don't have the fees. Where are the fees? And she replied to that email to Annette and said, your boss has already been paid the fees just like mine and the other lawyer. Vicky replied to that email. I didn't know about that email until all of this came out in September of what was going on. I didn't know about that reply email to Annette. Vicky did receive another email from Annette, and as I recall, it was an email that Annette had received from Jeannie Seckinger that Vicky did forward to me sometime towards the end of May. I think she had gotten it, but she was out on vacation for a couple of days, and when she got back, she forwarded it to me. And it was an email from Jeannie Seckinger that said something to the effect of, Alec thought he was owed more cost in the case, had some questions about cost, and they were trying to get some information so they could determine if they were owed more cost. All right. She did forward me that email. Yes, sir. This looks like the email string where Jeannie Seckinger, the Chief Financial Officer at PMPED, emailed Annette Griswold, which was Alec's primary paralegal, basically says that Nicole, I don't even know who that is, brought them the expense check and that didn't match their records. Alec thinks he has more outstanding cost, but can't say what, and they want to see if they can get some information concerning expenses and disbursements. Looks like Annette forwarded that to my paralegal, Vicky, on May the 27th. Vicky was out. Looks like Annette asked her again on June the 2nd if she could get her some information, and Vicky replied to Annette that she didn't deal with some of the documentation they were requesting, and so she would forward it to me.
All right. And that's June the 2nd, when?
2021, June 2nd.
June 2nd, 2021.
Yes, sir.
At this point in time, are Alec's fees still in your trust account?
No, sir. They were dispersed. The check was March. I don't know the exact date, but they were dispersed in 3 separate checks in March.
Okay. At some point in time around this June 2nd, thereabouts, did you receive any call from Lee Cope?
I believe I had a conversation with Lee Cope. I was trying a case in Hampton the week before that, and I was in and out of their office. And I believe I had a conversation with Lee. That would have been like the week of May the 24th or some of those days in there. And I believe I had a conversation with Lee. He asked me if all the money had been dispersed in the Ferris case. And I told him that it had not been, that we had some liens outstanding, medical bills and liens outstanding, and we were holding money for some additional costs in case things came in. And he didn't ask me any further questions. He did not mention that there were any issues or concerns about fees.
After you received that call from Lee Cope, well, what did you tell Lee Cope?
I told him I'd have to check into it.
After that, did you reach out to the defendant?
I did.
And what was your conversation with him?
I reached out to Alec and I said, Alec, hey, I don't know what all we talked about in that call, but at some point in time we talked about, I said, hey, I've got this email that's been forwarded to me by Vicky, where your firm is saying that you believe you're owed more cost. I put the cost down on the disbursement sheet that you had given me. But if you've got more cost, just figure out what it is and get it to me. We're holding some money to deal with some medical bills and liens. And with the client's consent, we were holding some money in case additional costs come in. Sometimes costs are slow coming in, and that's normal. And if there's an issue, just let me know. He said, I'll check on it, or there's not an issue, or I'll check on it. And I said, hey, this is the case that I disperse the fees to you, per your request. Is everything all right? And he said, yeah, I just got to make sure they know it's on the books the right way, and that this is the case that we've already worked out, the put it on the books.
Did he tell you he had structured those fees and annuities as he had told you before?
Yeah, that he had put them in the annuities.
Put them in the annuities. Firm's going to make sure they're on the books.
As far as I knew, the firm was aware that the monies had been paid to him, that he was putting them into annuities, that they would credit him as already having been paid, and they would account for that whenever or however they split up money.
Just to be clear, those funds were not in your trust account. They were gone at that point.
Yes, sir. They've been gone since March, and whenever those checks were cashed after I wrote them in March.
$792,000.
Yes, sir.
For purposes of this hearing, I'm not going to go into the night when Maggie and Paul were killed, but just very quickly, you did have some texts and calls with Alec that night. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you were at the residence and responding as friends and family did in the aftermath of that event. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
After the few weeks after the murders, did you
I've got one. I got one.
You good? Take a second.
I'm fine.
You
I'm
good?
fine. Yes, sir. I'm fine.
A few weeks after the murders, did you have another conversation with Alec, asking him if everything had been handled with the firm and those fees?
Yes, sir. I don't remember if it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks or what it was. I mean, everybody was destroyed. I don't think anybody was focusing on that. I know I wasn't, but at some point in time after that, I just said, hey, is everything all right with the, contact? And I got him with those fees, and he said it was.
At some point in mid-July 2021, over a month after the murders, did Alec call you up and ask you anything about these fees?
He did.
And tell me what your conversation with Alec was about these fees.
He contacted me and said that he was not able to structure the fees the way that he thought he was going to be able to do, that he had messed that up, and that the fees needed to be paid to the firm, and they needed to go back through my trust account.
Okay. And what did you say at that point?
I didn't see anything that caused me any red flags or anything, and felt like if that's what had to be done, that the fees had to be paid to his firm and needed to go back through my trust account. He could send me the money, and I could run it back through my trust account and then pay it to his firm.
So he's promising, he's saying, I will send you the money back. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you ultimately receive any funds?
600,000 of the 792.
You only received 600,000?
Yes, sir.
And how did you receive that? Do you recall?
I think it came in two different wires, that either came on the same day or on back-to-back days.
Did one of those wires come from Palmetto State Bank for $350,000?
I believe so, yes, sir.
And that was on or about July 15th?
That sounds right, yes, sir.
And the other was about $250,000 on July 16th, 2021?
I believe from Bank of America, yes, sir.
That was only $600,000?
Yes, sir.
So you're short from what you'd already given to Alec, correct?
Yes, sir.
How much are you short?
$192,000.
$192,000.
Yes, sir.
Did you have a conversation with Alec about being short?
I did.
And what was your conversation with Alec?
He told me that he wasn't able to access the $192,000 immediately, that he had already put it into the annuity, but he couldn't do it the way he wanted to, but he couldn't access it because it would be penalized if it was withdrawn, and that he would get me the money.
So what did you do in response to what your friend told you to do, or told you about the reason why he was short $192,000?
I mean, at that point, I had an indication that I was supposed to have $792,000 in my trust account that was supposed to have been paid to his firm. I'm responsible for that trust account. I put $192,000 of my own money in that trust account to cover the shortfall.
Based on his representation that he'd get you back?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 349, states 349 for this in-camera hearing, and do you recognize that?
I do.
Tell me what that is, please.
This is an email that I sent to Alec at his request. He said he needed to be able to provide it to his firm so they'd know the money was being held, and it was dated July 19th of 2021. It says, Alec, as discussed, I'm confirming that I'm holding in trust $600,000 in the gentleman's case and $192,000 in the lady's case, which represent attorney's fees. I'll continue to hold these monies in trust until I am instructed by you or your firm regarding payment.
You sent that email at that point in time. Did you receive any further inquiry at that point in time, at least, from the law firm saying, all right, go ahead and send us the 792?
Mr. Waters, I didn't hear anything else from the law firm at all until September the 3rd, 2021, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when Mr. Lee Cope called me. The first question he asked me was I still holding $792,000 in my firm? That seemed to be his first concern, and I said, yes, I am. And he said, well, we need to get that money paid to us. And then he told me that they had discovered a check that I think I remember him telling me that was from me to Alec in the firm, and that they had discovered that Alec was stealing money from the firm and from clients, and that he could not talk very long, and asked me not to say anything to anybody until the following Tuesday when they could issue a press release.
All right. Let me slow you down just real quick before we get there. At some point in time in August, did you attend any event or any conference where you saw Alec?
I did.
And what was that?
It's called South Carolina Association of Justice now. I still call it the Trial Lawyers Association. We have an annual convention in Hilton Head every August, the first weekend, and I usually attend and was there. And Alec was there.
Did you see Alec there?
I did.
And did you have any conversation with him at that conference about the $192,000 that you covered for him when he was going to pay that back?
I believe I asked him about it, and he indicated he was working on it. Some discussion about his father's estate. His father had just passed, and there would be money coming from the estate, and then with Maggie's estate being tied up, also.
Did he say he might sell some property or something like
I think
that?
he did mention that he was working towards selling some property.
At this point in time, still a couple of months after the tragic murders of Maggie and Paul, were you still very sensitive to your friend's emotional health and well-being?
Sure. I mean, I didn't push him.
Didn't push it.
No, sir.
At some point after that conference where you asked him about it, didn't want to push him, did you have another conversation with him about when that money might be paid?
I believe I did, yes, sir.
All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as states 350 for this hearing. See if you recognize that.
I do.
Tell me what that is.
It is a very rudimentary, handwritten, scratched out promissory note that I asked Alec to sign for me, which he did August 17th of 2021, acknowledging that I had loaned him $192,000 that he would repay within 60 days, I think is what it says.
And tell me how the circumstances of how you came to get this essentially on a folded piece of paper. This is a copy of it, right?
It is, yes, sir.
All right, tell me about it, please.
That was more about, I mean, I wanted to get repaid my money as quickly as possible, but that was more about, I was concerned, just like everybody else, everybody in his firm and everybody in his family, that he was going to do something to himself, that he was going to kill himself. And, I mean, I knew enough to know that that I couldn't make a claim against his estate if there wasn't something in writing. And so that was more, I went to him and said, Alec, look, I hate to even ask this, but I need to ask you to do this in case something happens to you. And I phrased it like if you get hit by a car or something, but it was more about worried about what he might do. And I need to ask you to do this so that if there's a problem, I can deal with it. And he did. He didn't have a problem with it.
You already said this part, but at some point a few weeks later, you get a call from Lee Cope asking about those fees and saying that Alec had been stealing money, right?
Yes, sir.
That hit you like a thunderbolt?
It knocked me down. I mean, I was with a group of guys. I could not talk. Lee told me he could not talk very long. I didn't know how to react.
Did you try to get in touch with Alec?
I did. I mean, I couldn't do it immediately. I think I spoke to Lee for just a minute. He told me I needed to call him right back. I called him back. We talked for just a minute. He couldn't talk long. He said he had other things to take care of to deal with all of what was going on.
Do you remember what day this is?
September 3rd, Friday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon,
2021?
2021. Yes, sir.
You remember it like it was yesterday?
I can tell you exactly where I was and who I was with.
Tell me more about what happened.
I finished up what I was doing with that group. I think I tried to call Alec, or I know I texted him. And I believe I tried to call also, and I couldn't get him.
Did you continue to try to contact?
I did. I think he did respond maybe that afternoon later and said, I forget what it was. It was in a meeting or something. I'll call you back as soon as I can. But at some point in time, I kept trying to get him. And we did talk later.
What did you talk about? What day was that when you finally were able to talk to him?
I think I did speak to him that evening, this Friday, September the 3rd, by phone. I don't remember the exact of the conversation, but I said, look, Lee's called me and told me what's going on. What is going on? He said, I really can't talk about it much right now. I said, I need to talk to you, and I want it to be in person. I need to know what's going on. And
So what happened next?
well, he said he would try to meet with me the next morning, and that he was sorry. And I don't remember all the gist of that conversation, but the next morning I tried to call him. I woke up and I started driving towards Beaufort because I thought he was staying at John Marvin's house down that way, and I started calling him and driving his direction. And eventually he called me back and said he would meet me in Alameda at his mom and daddy's house.
Did you meet him there?
I did.
Was that in the morning of September 4th?
Probably a little bit before lunchtime, kind of late morning, yes, sir.
Did y'all have a conversation?
We did.
Where was the conversation?
I got there before he did. I don't think I pulled in the driveway. I kind of waited out on the road. Pulled in the driveway. We went in the side door. The caregiver was there. We went out onto the front porch, and we talked on the front porch.
And what did he say to you?
I mean, the first thing I asked him is, Alec, what the F or what the H is going on here? What is going on? And have you done something else to me or that involves me that I don't know about? Because I know about this, and I've got to deal with this. But is there something else you've done that I don't know about that I need to be concerned with?
And what did he say?
He broke down crying. Said I can't right this second. He went inside, came back out with some paper towels, and told me that he had a drug problem, that he was addicted to opioids, and that he had been addicted for, I don't remember if he said 20 or 20 plus years, but for 20 years or so.
Did he say anything about the money?
He told me that he had been stealing money.
Did he have a particular phrase about what he had done to you?
Shit me up.
He said he shit you up.
Shit me up or shit me off or something like that, but I think it was he shit me up.
And he said that he admitted to you he had been stealing client money?
Yes, sir.
So he confessed that to you, is that correct?
He said he had shit a lot of people up.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as States 313 in this in-camera hearing. Do you recognize that?
Yes, sir.
What is that?
I think this is the original of that $225,000 fee check written in the gentleman's case directly to Richard Alexander Murdaugh, Esquire.
Is that your signature on it?
It is. I don't remember exactly how it ended, Mr. Waters. I was so mad. I mean, I'd loved the guy for so long. And I probably still loved him a little bit, but I was so mad. I don't remember how it ended. I left. I mean, I asked him, how did I not know these things or see these things? And we talked. He was concerned about me getting my $192,000 back. Seemed concerned. Told him I wasn't worried about that. At that point, I wanted to make sure there wasn't something else.
This was a little bit before lunch on September 4th.
Yes, sir.
We
didn't leave. I'm sure I yelled at the beginning, or at least raised my voice, but I didn't leave yelling and screaming and hollering. We didn't fight. But I left, and I wasn't happy.
Where'd you go after you left? Do you remember?
I rode through Hampton. Actually, through Hardee's and grabbed something for a bite of lunch on the road and headed back to Columbia where I live.
That day, did you hear anything else about Alec?
I did.
About how long after you left Alec did you hear something?
I had stopped in my office in Bamberg or at the post office to pick something up, and I was somewhere between Bamberg and Columbia when I got a call. It was either from Randy or Lee Cope, but I believe it was Lee Cope.
And what were you informed?
That Alec had been shot in the head and that he was on a helicopter going to the hospital in Savannah. And I think it was Savannah Hospital, but they said the hospital, but I believe they said Savannah Hospital.
What'd you do in response to that information?
What the devil's going on? I thought he'd tried to kill himself. I didn't think he was suicidal when I left, but when I heard that, I thought he'd tried to kill himself.
Did you go to the scene, or did you return back home?
I went back home.
Did you try to reach out to Alec after that?
I did not. I talked to his brother Randy, I think some that same day and some on the next day. But by that time, frankly, all this had, for lack of a better term, blown up to where I didn't think I'd be able to talk to Alec. And I don't know that I wanted to.
Have you had a conversation with him since?
I have not spoken to him since that morning at Alameda.
Have you had any other communication with him?
He's texted me once or twice, to which I've responded something very generic, like, I'm thinking about your family. And I think he may have written a letter some short letter that, frankly, I turned over to my lawyers.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as States 351. See if you recognize that.
I do.
And what is that?
This is one of the texts that I received from Alec and my response.
Is that a number you previously had recognized being Alex?
I don't know if I'd ever seen that number before, but it's not the normal cell phone number that I would have used to contact him or he to contact me. I mean, sometimes he'd tell me he was calling me from the phone in his car. Sometimes it would be a number I didn't recognize.
Screen there.
Yes, sir.
Does it say, "So sorry for all the havoc I created for you. I'd do anything to make it right"?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. That's all the questions for this in-camera hearing.
There you have it. This piece of shit stole $192,000 from his firm and left his best friend holding the bag. That guy had to pay this money back. And you could hear it in his voice. He wanted to beat the living shit out of Alec for this, and rightfully so. Unbelievable. We got much more coming your way on this, and next up will be the testimony, and I mean the eye-opening testimony of attorney Mark Tinsley, who represented the Beach family in that boat crash. He discusses how Alec used intimidation, and that's right, I said Alec because I go Alex and Alec back and forth. It's Alec. His name is freaking Alexander, so y'all know how it is. But he discusses how Alec used intimidation during that lawsuit against Paul in which Mallory Beach was killed. So stay tuned for that. You're not going to believe it. Check out the Patreon, patreon.com, Exposed Podcast Files. We upload all kinds of shit to that. We stay active on that Patreon. It keeps this show going, and I could not do it without those people. Thank you very much. And until next time, for Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.